can see I have my PPE on today, and we are going to be doing the lab exploring physical and chemical changes. This is for chemistry 1406, and my name is Nixie, and let's get to it. For activity 1, you will need a thermometer, sodium hydroxide, hydrochloric acid, sodium carbonate, test tube rack, 2 test tubes, your 250 milliliter beaker, and your 10 milliliter graduated cylinder. Our first step is to place 2 milliliters of hydrochloric acid into the 10 milliliter cylinder. You will now place the 2 milliliters into the test tube. The next step, after both have 2 milliliters of their respective chemical reactant, you will measure the hydrochloric acid first, and then you record the temperature in the chart. You would then rinse and dry, and you would repeat the same process with the sodium carbonate and record the temperature in the chart and rinse and dry the thermometer. Now we will combine the reactants together and swirl. Now we record the temperature of the combined reactants. Now for activity 2, we need 10 milliliters of water. We also need our 10 milliliter graduated cylinder, 2 clean and dried test tubes, 0.3 grams of sodium polyacrylate, and our thermometer. Now that you added 10 milliliters of water in one test tube, you add the sodium polyacrylate into the second test tube. After measuring the temperature of the water, we now combine the water into the sodium polyacrylate and gently swirl. Done recording the temperature. Your substance should have looked solidified. You have to clean it out into a water bath and dry your equipment, and that's it. For activity 3, you will need 2 clean and dry test tubes, sodium carbonate, copper sulfate, a thermometer, a beaker, and water for cleaning, and a paper towel for drying. Using your 10 milliliter graduated cylinder, you will put 2 milliliters of sodium carbonate in one test tube and 2 milliliters of copper sulfate in another test tube. Then you will use your thermometer to measure the temperatures of each and record on your graph in your lab manual. Once you have placed both 2 milliliters of each respective chemical, you will now record the temperature of each. Next step is to combine both chemicals and record their temperatures. After swirling gently, you should get a solidified substance. After you're done recording the observation, clean out test tube with water completely. And for activity 4, you will need matches or anything to start a fire, forceps, a aluminum dish, ice, a pot holder, or any plate to put the hot aluminum dish on after you're done using it, and a tea light. For activity A, you will take the tea light and the matches and set the tea light on and observe any and record on your lab manual. For part 1, after 1 minute of burn time, you should record all observations on your chart and you are done. For part B, you should place 1 piece of ice in the aluminum dish and with your forceps place directly above the tea light for 1 minute. After a minute over the flame, your ice cube should be dissolved, and you should turn off your tea light and place your aluminum dish on a heat-safe surface. And you are done with part B. For activity 5, you'll need 1 gram of sugar, 5 milliliters of water, 2 clean and dry test tubes, and a thermometer. For the first step, you will pour the 5 milliliters of water in one test tube and the 1 gram of sugar. You now have to measure the temperature of the water. You now have to add the water to the test tube containing the sugar, gently swirl, and record the temperature. After recording the temperature, you simply clean up the test tubes and you're done with activity 6. You will need phenolphthalein, hydrochloric acid, sodium hydroxide, 2 clean and dry test tubes, a beaker for your waste, a thermometer, and 1 pipette. Part A, you need 2 milliliters of sodium hydroxide, and you will place in the test tube. The next step, you record the temperature and take out the thermometer, and then put exactly 1 drop of phenolphthalein in the solution, and gently swirl. After you're done, you should have a changed color again, and you record the temperature, and you just clean up, and you're done with part A. Pour 2 milliliters of hydrochloric acid in another test tube. Make sure you kept the previous solution from part A. Recording the temperature, you have to place the hydrochloric acid in the solution from part A. Lastly, dump out the solution into your beaker and rinse out all of your other equipment besides pipette, which goes in the trash. For activity 7, you will need copper sulfate, sodium hydroxide, 10 millimeter graduated cylinder, 2 clean and dry test tubes, a beaker for your waste, and a thermometer. You will place 2 milliliters of each chemical in their respective test tubes. Pour the solutions of one content into the other test tube. Gently swirl and mix, and you will record the temperature as well. After you record temperature, just clean up your test tubes. For activity 8, you will need your prepared solution of blue and yellow water, 2 clean and dry test tubes, and your thermometer, and a beaker for cleaning. After getting the temperature, you will mix the blue and yellow solution together, and then record the final temperature. After recording everything in your chart, you just put in your beaker and you clean Activity 9, you will need hydrochloric acid, 1 clean and dry test tube, a magnesium metal ribbon, and that is also part of the magnesium metal ribbon cut, and your thermometer. After measuring the temperature, you will put in the 0.5 centimeters of magnesium ribbon in the solution and gently swirl. You will now measure the temperature. After you record temperature, you simply clean up and you're done. For activity 10, you need 2 grams of table salt, some copper sulfate, 2 clean and dry test tubes, a beaker for cleanup, and your thermometer. Measuring the temperature, you will put the copper sulfate in the table salt test tube. Gently stir. After measuring the temperature, save. For activity 11, you will need several pieces of aluminum cut from the aluminum dish used in activity 4, thermometer, and the solution from activity 10. The temperature, you will add the several pieces of aluminum into the solution. Gently stir and observe and record the observation. After observing and recording on your chart, you should record the temperature of the solution. After measuring temperature, you dump out solutions into the beaker, rinse out, and dry, and you're done. Activity 12, you need copper sulfate, a nail, an emery board or sanding paper, 1 clean and dry test tube, tweezers or forceps, and a test tube. You will add 5 milliliters of copper sulfate, and then you will sand down the nail with either your emery board or your sanding paper. After taking the temperature of the copper sulfate, you would place the nail in and allow it to sit for 1 minute. Record observations in lab manual. After observation, take out nail with forceps and observe the nail. Now take temperature of solution without nail. After you are finished recording any of your observations, you throw out your solution into your beaker and throw your nail in the trash, and you're done with this lab.